Hunting our Bus, The Journey Onward by Master Atlan, Chapter 45. See you again. I can't even begin to tell you how disappointed I am. The school advisor admonished the students in front of her. Some of them flinched under her voice, while others looked guilty for being in this situation. Glinda was bristling. You had only one task to do today before leaving for your break, and you were late for it. How do you explain yourself? John fearfully raised his hand. We were actually listening to a story, and that was a rhetorical question, Mr. Arca. He cowered back in his seat before the teacher rubbed her eyes behind her glasses. Her disappointment seemed to ease itself before she looked between them all. All you have done extraordinarily well for your first semester here. I will commend you for your efforts and how well you handled the ups and downs of it. They smiled between each other for a compliment before her glare returned. But when the 12 of you are together, there's a serious dip in discipline and an increase in recklessness. And yes, Miss Schnee, I mean you as well. The Harris lowered her hand and Glinda turned to the headmaster. Professor, do you have anything to say to our tardy students? The silver-haired headmaster looked between all those students gathered in front of them. Are you going to make sure to stay safe over your break? Yes, sir. Good. Ospen smiled, then have fun, and I expect to see you all in 2 weeks. Ospen! Oh, come on, Glinda. No need to reprimand them any further. I understand how necessary it is to install discipline, but keeping them after the semester has officially closed is simply cruel. He turned away as the students smiled and cheered in joy. Now, we have students from Vacuo to accommodate, and the one from Atlas and Haven soon as well. Shall we get to work? Glinda's nose scrunched up with annoyance before she let out a heavy sigh and followed him back to his office. The kind headmaster gave them one last nod before he was off. We're free! Nora, Ruby, Naruto, John, Kiba, and Yang all cheered as they ran into the courtyard. There were still a few students wandering around the campus, and they sent some looks their way at the group celebration. No more homework, no more tests, no sharing bathrooms, no waking up for classes. We're free! Ruby sprinted down the pathway at full speed. Free! Wow. Tenten smiled before turning to the others. How do you think they'll react when 2 weeks passes in no time? Pyrrha shook her head. I think we should let them enjoy themselves for now. I'm not going to miss this over the break. Weiss bemoaned while watching her team and friends dance around like morons. The last day of the semester, and they still couldn't show any tact before leaving Beacon. She looked over at their fondest teammates for agreement. I'm not the only one getting an ulcer from this antics, am I? Blake, huh? And she came out of her torpor and saw Weiss looking at her oddly. I'm sorry, I was just thinking about something. Was it about the docs last night? Oh, right, there was that too. She'd almost forgotten just how much that was going to plague her mind as well. But right now she was noticing the surprised look on some people's faces as they watched Naruto celebrate with their friends. They were watching him. Because without his bandana, they could plainly see his ears now. Hey, that looks like fun. They looked back to see Sun come up behind them while their team celebrated the end of the school. Hey, Sun, Blake greeted the monkey fondness before a casual smile settled over her face. Are you finally able to get a room? You know it, that hot, scary teacher chewed my ear off for a while, giving me a speech about responsibility and patience before I finally got a place in the dorm. He puffed his chest out with pride and smirked. I'll make sure to break it in before my team gets here. The others gathered around to meet her new associate. Pyrrha tilted her head. And who might this be? And this is Sun Wukong. He's a student from Haven. We met while we were away. She turned back to the monkey and motioned to the people around her. Son, you met Weiss Schnee last night. Son waved and Weiss was polite enough to nod back to the barely dressed young man. Those two are Tenta Tamara and Tamura and Pyrrha Nikos. Holy crap! Son gawked at the sight of the champion in flesh. Pyrrha continued to smile despite his shock, probably used to dealing with this response back in Mistral. I heard you came to Beacon, but I didn't think I'd actually meet you. Are you in the tournament too? She nodded. Oh, and I thought my chances of winning the whole thing were actually pretty good. Blake ignored his melancholy tone and turned to the two boys, and those are Lai Ren and Sasuke Uchiha. Nice to meet you. Naruto told me a bunch about you while we were slamming it up. Say you were a pretty cool guy, if a little grumpy. Sasuke rolled his eyes as Sun looked around the courtyard with a big smile. Man, this is so cool. I never thought I'd actually get to come to Beacon. Hey, can I ask if any of you guys have seen these 12? Son, they looked back to see the other half of the group coming back from their sudden celebration to rejoin their friends. Sun grinned and returned Naruto's high five in an instant. I saw you guys celebrating, enjoying the freedom. Absolutely. It was the short ginger companion that answered the golden-haired monkey. She threw out her arms in celebration. How could we not be excited? And who are you? And the curiosity about who the fawn is who seemed a little delayed, but Naruto answered, this is Sun. He's the guy we met in the city from Haven. I got to hang out with him and Blake while they were off learning a lesson or whatever. What did you guys do down in Vale the other time? You mean besides thwarting evil and being totally badass? Sun shrugged. We mostly ate food and played games while Sourpuss over there moped in the corner. No one seemed to acknowledge Blake's face twist indignantly as Sun turned to his fox friend. That reminds me, we never settled on who won all the fights we had. Oh, Naruto looked up and thought, oh yeah, I guess we didn't. And that might be something we can settle when we get back from break. Is that so? Sun crossed his arms before cockily smirking and raising his eyebrow. That sounds like an excuse. Oh, Naruto wouldn't admit that the chiding and jeering from his crowd of friends actually got to him, but he did at that moment feel the flames of war and competition burn brightly inside him. He grit his teeth before a rough chortle escaped his throat. Okay, is that how it's gonna be? Buddy, it's been like that from the beginning. Then let's settle this. Hunting, the fox walked from his corner and slowly stepped over the stone tiles of the ruins. The blonde was garbed in a long orange and red robe with baggy black pants. He traversed the ruins with shoes and held out a long, ornatable blade at his side. He heard a laugh and stumbled back as a figure landed in front of him in a crouch. The monkey stood up, spinning his staff around expertly before it stopped at his side. He smirked and winked at his opponent. The two took stances, taking their weapons as they waited for the moment their battle would commence. It was tense, their fingers tightening as their eyes narrowed with contempt. The monkey disappeared in a burst of speed as he swung his staff out to strike on the fox's chin, the staff burrowing its way through the ground before coming up to strike. The tip of his staff clashed with the sword as the fox was flung back and spun through the air before landing. He turned the blade into a reverse grip and charged before slashing across the staff. The fox was relentless as he attacked, without passing in a shower of sparks. The monkey had to step back and change his position to counter the fox's attack. When the robed swordsman attacked again, the staffed wielder countered and swung himself out of his head. The fox had to quickly stop and lean back as the staff came swinging in with enough force to shatter the pillar behind him into dust. The staff was pulled back and spun around with the force of a hurricane as the ends came down hard enough to tear the ground. The fox raised his blade and blocked the spin of the staff with enough force to crack the ground beneath him. But the staff blurred when the monkey spun around and brought the other end into the fox's leg. His balance was knocked before the staff came around again and slapped him away in an instant. The fox flew through the air and hit the cliffside hard enough to split the rock completely. The fox pulled himself out of the cliffside, blood steadily dripping down his face. As he looked over to see the monkey showing off his staff skills, he grit his teeth and pressed his feet together against the cliff before dropping off it, cratering the entire cliffside. His sword came down on the staff, and the air along was enough to leave a gash on the monkey's shoulder. They separated and quickly re-engaged as their weapons disappeared in a rush of blurs. The staff struck over the fox's body hard and fast, cracking bones and ribs along the way. Where the staff couldn't block or defend, the sword came down like a guillotine, cutting, carving, and slashing its way through any exposed flesh the monkey couldn't protect. Blood splattered to the ground as the two warriors battled. The end of the staff came down and on one of the fox's eyes narrowed to burst it within the socket. Blood gushed out and down his face, but he refused to let up. He ducked beneath the swing of the staff and slashed out with a cut that gutted his stomach. The staff went for the fox's other eye, but instead of the one eye, it met the palm of his hand. The staff pierced through the fox's palm, but the monkey realized he couldn't escape now. With one swift slash, the sword came under his arm and sliced off the monkey's limb completely. He stumbled back in shock and looked down to see the sword through his abdomen now. Blood filled his mouth, and he looked up at his opponent in horror. Before the sword came back through his neck, the head rolled over rolled over the ground before the body toppled along with it. The fox dropped his sword and slowly pulled the staff out of his hand, the metal scraping against the bone before it was finally out and dropped by his feet. He bent down and grabbed the decapitated head by its fur. He held the primate's head up in victory and cheered him. He had won. Player 1 wins. Yeah! Now to step back from his controller and hooray, I win! Bullshit! Sun exclaimed and filled with his controller board a few times. These controls lag. He pointed at the arcade screen while the fox did a little dance of glory. That fight was totally unfair. Oh, stop whining. Fine, then let me play first, player. Bring it. The two switched spots and quickly brought up the character sheet. I'll kick your ass a second time with a handicap in your dreams. Behind them, Ruby, Blake, and White watched the two new friends battle it out in the game. Ruby watched totally enraptured by the last fight as she bounced with excitement. They're good. I bet Yang and I could totally beat them if we tried, but they're still pretty good. Hey, who do you think is gonna win now? The two girls were unfamiliar with the extremely violent video game. Stared in absolute shock at what they just saw. White felt the shiver go through her back at the sight she just saw before shaking her head. For an arcade game, that was far more visceral than expected. Oh yeah, Super Animal Bipedal Ancient Mortal 2 has the best finishing moves ever, Ruby said with an excitement that unnerved the two older girls. Rumor has it that the game developers actually observed the hunters fighting Grim to get the fighting styles and the gore just right. Well, that was terrifying. I call Rhino, her son said. Elephant. Naruto followed as their fight started, and the boy got ready for another intense fight. Here we. Oh wait, what's going on? Congratulations, morons! White droned. You picked two characters so big they barely fit on the screen together. Now what? Hey! You wanna go? Yeah, I'll touch you. Watch me nudge you. I think I'm done watching them. Blake made the move, and Weiss happily complied. Ruby following behind them as she wouldn't get left behind. After some serious blustering between Naruto and Sun, it was finally stopped when Ruby offered her bright idea that they should settle it down at the arcade with a proper fighting game. The moment they arrived, the others realized they didn't want to just watch them fight, and branched off to see what they could do. The girls walked around and saw John and Ren battling out into a dance game. And what was most surprising was the fact that the two were neck and neck, and the scores were nearly perfect. Off to the side was an air hockey table where Yang and Tenten were challenging each other. It was fairly worrying to see how hard they were knocking the puck around, and how they used their semblance at random points to get the advantage. And watching the speedy puck bounce back and forth was Sasuke, keeping a watchful eye as the girls lost themselves in the game. And finally, Nora and Kiba were playing a Wak Grim, or more accurately, Kiba was keeping Nora at bay as the orange-haired powerhouse waved a hammer around in an effort to shatter the machine. She rumbled on madly about wanting to get the unrivaled high score ever, and Kiba had to catch her under her arms and off her feet before she could follow through with it. Pyrrha, Ruby quickly came over to the redhead champion's side as she saw her standing in front of a virtual shooting range. The warrior looked particularly miffed as the hooded girl came to her aid and saw her low score. Oh, what happened? I tried to shoot down the Nevermore and Ursa that popped up, but I couldn't hit them. Her shoulders sagged as she held up the rifle controller. I think the sights on these are broken. Oh, well that's your problem, dummy. You never used the sights on the controller. They're totally rigged. Ruby snatched the plastic rifle from the older girl and started the game again. She started shooting Grim as soon as they appeared. You gotta eyeball it. Pierre watched with interest at how fast Ruby shot down the targets, obviously having some experience with these games. That's amazing. Pierre marveled at the high scores she got in one go. So, how well did I do in comparison? Not well, Ruby shrugged, but you just need some practice. Here, she handed back the controller and Piero was prepared for the second round. Now show no mercy. Blake and Wise sighed in unison before finding an empty bench by the side for them to take a seat. The two girls fell back and relaxed amidst the cacophony of excited teenagers and children running around the arcade to play games. For the two girls, it was probably the worst place for them to come for a relaxing outing. I can't believe them. I actually agreed to come along. I'm sure they'll get bored soon enough. Blake offered the Harris some reprieve from the current predicament. She groaned, but she at least seemed a little relieved to hear that. Blake relaxed into her seat, noticing the stress that had plagued her just a few days ago was now nowhere to be seen. As she slowly opened her eyes again. I can't believe we finally finished, and it feels like one very long, extended headache from start to finish, Weiss noted. 4 years to go. They shared a laugh at the idea of going through the same craziness of the last few months over another 4 years. If that realization came at any other moment, then they would pass out from exhaustion. But right now, they were just thankful that everything was right again. Not normal by any stretch of the imagination. But right, I know you said everything was fine. Blake finally broke the silence between them as Weiss sat up beside her. But I want to tell you about me, not as an excuse, but because I don't want to hide myself from you or others, if that's okay. Weiss was silent before signing with a nod. It's probably a good idea, but we're sort of pressed for time right now, so how about we wait until we come back from break? She tried to look unconcerned and nonchalant, but the look in her eyes when she turned back to Blake was one of worry that she might have insulted her. Is that okay? That's perfect. Blake smiled. Thank you. Something rung in Weiss's pocket, and she pulled out her scroll to see a new message arriving in on her screen. She sighed and pushed herself out of her seat and patted down her skirt. That's my pickup. It's time for me to go. Blake stood up as well. Safe travels. Thanks, Weiss said. But if you feel bored or lonely, you can call me anytime. Just so you're aware. Blake smiled with appreciation for her consideration as the sneaker aside. I suppose I should go tell the others goodbye for all the chaos it'll cause me. Wish me luck. Good luck. Blake watched Weiss walk back to the machines to tell Ruby and the others she was heading back home. It was odd now that she gave it a moment's of thought. She had been with these girls nearly every day for months now, and now they were heading back home to see their family and her. She was staying behind in Beacon. It was going to be strange being in the room by herself. There were certain advantages: no early morning rituals, showers at her luxury instead of her urgency, and she could read any book she wanted without having to worry about her team barging in at any moment. Disadvantages? Well, she'd keep the place together until they came back. No, Blake spotted Ruby hanging off of Weiss with tears in her eyes. I didn't know it would be this soon. I'm sorry, Weiss. I promise to call and text you every 3 hours. If you do that, then I'll turn off my phone for the entire break. Weiss blankly answered as she stood still like a statue with Ruby crying on her. Yang quickly ran over and hugged her as well. The short girl squirmed. Okay, enough. Let me go already. Yep. Keep it together. Hunting? And so, what's this dump and why are we here? Nor asked the question on all their minds as they returned to the crappy building some of them knew as the hideout. Nart had suggested a quick stop before heading back to Beacon and he had brought them here. You're kidding, right? Son groaned as his arms limply hung at his side. Dude, I thought we were done with this place. I still got back problems from that stupid couch. What is this place? Ruby looked around curiously and pulled her foot back from a sticky area on the ground. Our old hideout, Naruto admitted as he stepped forward and looked around the room. We stayed here during our thief days and over the weekend too. So, why come back? Naruto looked back at his friends and smirked, his ears twitching on his head before he turned back around. He immediately dashed across the room and landed a diving kick into one of the couches, knocking its back off completely as the others watched him crush into the ground. He quickly picked himself up and smiled. I hate this place. I say we wreck it. They looked at him in surprise before he gave a scoff. You serious? Absolutely. Naruto clambered up to his feet and offered them the whole room. Let's celebrate finishing the semester. Break shit, go wild, have fun. They looked between each other in question before Pyrrha asked nervously, Naruto, are you sure it's a good idea to wreck a place like the mattress went flying across the room and smashed into the wall beside them. They all looked over in shock at the black clad fauness dusting off her hands. All eyes were on her before she shrugged. That bed was too uncomfortable. Sasuke stepped up and kicked the bed until it completely broke apart. He stepped back and nodded. It really was. His son was the next to join, jumping over and picking the other couch up from the underneath. He flipped it and laughed. That's for my lumbar, asshole! Soon enough, the others started easing in and causing mayhem of their own. Ruby grabbed pillows and started ripping them apart with laughter. Ren picked up some trash and started crumpling it all up in a ball, but ball that he threw at Yang before she bursted with flame. Titan charged into drawers with her body covered in steel as she started to giggle. Pyrrha was hesitant before she raised her hands and metal parts started lifting off the ground. She threw them around into objects into rooms as Kiba and John started flipping stuff off. Anarchy! Nora yelled, grabbing the game system and spiking it to the ground, but when nothing hit, she looked at her empty hands and wondered, huh? Not the game system. Naruto was right behind her, clutching the precious entertainment system to his chest. You never break the game system. We could still use this. Well, what do I get to break? Nora huffed while the destruction around them halted for a moment. She crossed her arms in annoyance and pouted before looking down at the drawer the system was mounted on. She looked back up at the fox. Can I break the stand? You can break the stand. Anarchy! She picked it up with one hand and tossed it up to break high over the wall. Naruto looked over at the destruction they were causing with the smiles on their face. A little release from all the stress and tension from the semester, or even just the last week alone. They all could use it, but it wasn't just for that. This place was ruined now. They couldn't come back here even if they wanted to. He couldn't come back, and he didn't want to. No more looking back. Time to move forward. Hunting. Squall. Yep, squall. I looked it up and everything, like a powerful gust of wind before a storm. It's perfect. Ruby turned his old kodachi around in her hand before handing it back to him. I can come up with some more names if you want. Looks like you really just need some time to make great names. Blake saw Ruby fume at the joke at her expense as Naruto smiled and started collecting his weapon together. You can hold off for now. Most of them are broke anyway. I'm down to 3 and Stormer. I've got to figure that out before I come back. But you can use a normal amount of swords this time, huh? You still sore because I whipped your butt? Of course, her partner reignited in old argument, and the two of them were quickly at each other's throats again. The cowgirl just rolled her eyes and approached Ruby's side as her leader looked at the heated blonde with a wary tenderness. Think they'll stop him? Maybe. I don't know anymore. Ruby reached into her locker and pulled out her scythe before hugging it closely. I'm just glad I'll be bringing Crescent Rose back home now. Blake would never understand how Ruby could find such affection for her weapon like that. Dad's going to be shocked when he sees how good I've gotten. Not as much as me. Her partner gloated and flexed her muscles. Stronger than ever. That'll have to admit how great we are now. You guys ready? Tena came up to them with her steak bag over her shoulder. Kiba and Sasuke followed up behind her before she smiled him. Come on, we have to go meet with Juniper before heading out. Come in. Ruby hooked her scythe behind her and grabbed Blake's hand to pull her along. Come on. She was nearly pulled off her feet from how fast Ruby yanked her from the lockers and out to the bulkhead docks. She could see Red and Nora seeing off John and Piro with hugs and handshakes. John was going off on the Veil flights while Piro was on the shuttle to the Mistral airship. They came up to the bulkhead and Ruby quickly turned back around to face her. She looked flustered while fixing her hair and dress. Okay, Blake, this is goodbye. For just 2 weeks at max, Blake reminded. There's no reason to be so upset. I know. It didn't seem like she did. But are you sure you don't want to come stay with us? You can bunk with me or Yang. We have plenty of room. She smiled at the considerate offer from her leader, but shook her head. I'll be fine. You just enjoy your holiday, and I'll enjoy mine too. But you'll be by yourself. You know how much I enjoy my solitude. But come on, sis. No need to keep bothering her. Yang came up to her side and wrapped an arm around Ruby's shoulders to calm her down. Blake's a big girl. She might throw a tantrum every now and then, but she can take care of herself. Blake glared at the unnecessary jab before Yang turned to her, and she noticed a softness in her lilac eyes. But we're gonna call you every day to make sure you're okay. You got that? No excuses. It sounded annoying and gratuitous, but she didn't mind hearing them every day if she had to. She smiled and nodded in agreement. She stumbled a little when Ruby jumped into her chest with a hug as Yang came around and got her as well. For once, Blake didn't feel the need to fight back and just relaxed into her embrace. She got her arms around them in return, and they shared a quick moment before separating. Ruby's eyes were watering, and Yang chewed her lip before hiding it with a smile. They waved goodbye and headed into the bulkhead as Blake waved in return. Once they were gone, with Kiba and John jumping in as well, the bulkhead lifted off to the head of their city, and she lingered around and watched the ship disappear in the city skyline before heading back to the bulkhead. Hey, Blake. Naruto walked over despite their bullhead starting to pick up wind as well. She turned to face him and couldn't help the smile forming on her lips. Don't you be late if you hang around, and won't you be late if you hang around any longer? I'm sure they can hang back for a few more seconds. He joked, but didn't sound like he had much basis for that confidence. He scratched the back of his head and laughed. I just want you to know that I finished the book you lent me, and I'm sold on books. He admitted in a defeated tone. You win. She didn't feel like she was petty enough to brag, but she certainly felt a little smirk that stretched her face. It's back in my room. I'm sorry I didn't get back to getting back to you before. It's fine, really. She stopped him before he could continue. I'll just grab it when I can. She looked back at the minstrel shuttle and smiled. Excited to finally go home? Nervous and terrified beyond belief, he chuckled, but his ears flattened on his head almost instantly. Apparently, she wasn't the only one with expressive ears, but excited all the same. Say hi to your father for me. She tried to keep her smile on, but it slowly fell into a neutral expression. His mouth straightened out as well, seeing her change before she spoke. There's still a lot we need to figure out now with the White Fang working with Torchwick, and I want to talk with you too when you get back. Absolutely, he nodded before grinning, but make sure to take some time to relax. Nothing's gonna come off you running yourself ragged. She didn't feel like the worry was necessary, but she nodded anyway to make sure he wasn't concerned. Nacho smiled again and laughed. Make sure to have some fun before we come back, okay? No promises. She smiled back before he grinned and waved her goodbye. Blake made her way back to her room as the sound of the bullhead lifted off the docks faded from her surroundings. She made her way back to her room while her thoughts lingered on the craziness that happened that last night. The White Fang, Noble Guard, Danzo, Adam, and Torchwick, they were all working towards something, some goal that required a ludicrous amount of dust. She was going to have to figure out what was going on. But right now, she probably did just need to relax. She heard something behind her as she reached her door and saw Sasuke return from the dock as well. And since Itachi was his only friend, and God knows where he was right now, Sasuke had nowhere else to go. He probably declined any invitation to stay with his team as well, letting them enjoy their time back home while he got time to himself. He silently passed by and went for his door while fishing for his scroll. I'm sorry. He paused and looked towards her as if surprised to hear her address him. She couldn't blame him considering how rarely she ever bothered to interact with him. She turned to face him properly and spoke up. I'm sorry I've been putting a distance from you this entire semester. I did it for so many reasons. Because the Uchiha name scared me. Because I remember hearing what that group did to the White Fang members. I was afraid you would figure out who I was. That you would attack me. And I was even more afraid that you'd be right to do it. But you didn't deserve that judgment. And I'm sorry. He stared at her for a moment before shaking his head. You weren't wrong with that judgment. I was part of the Uchiha that hunted the White Fang, so you're right to being wary of me, but I would never have hurt you. I know that now, she admitted. You aren't what I thought you would be. You carry a name synonymous with pain for the fondness a long time ago, but you've proven that it's just a name. It doesn't have to mean anything from all those years ago. Except it's not just a name, and I'm no different from what you believed, he argued in a low voice. The Uchiha are still out there instigating a war with the White Fang, and as long as they do that, then it'll always seem like the Uchiha and anyone with a problem with fondness are against the group fighting for them. The White Fang will never let that name die down with hatred like that, and I'm just as bad. You remember the story earlier today? I tormented and hurt that man, and got him killed. I know, but you didn't kill him. He was twisted by a life of pain, and what happened to him pushed. Blake paused when she realized the grimace on his face at her attempt to alleviate his guilt. She looked back at him. I know, man. A kind old man that took care of me when I was younger. He told me about something called the cycle of hatred, and perpetuated hatred and anger that never ceases as long as we keep acting certain ways to each other, what we say to each other, how we look at each other, but what you're doing, trying to help all kinds of people despite what your name may carry. I think he'd agree that you're a good step away from the cycle. She looked him in the eyes and nodded. Thank you, Sasuke. He looked at her in surprise before taking a deep breath to calm himself down. She noticed him hesitate and clear still before nodding in thanks. Thank you. What are you guys doing? Sasuke quickly rubbed his eyes of tears he wasn't even sure had come out. As Ren and Nora came back from the sending of their team off as well, Nora came to a stop in front of them. Stop being the operative word, because even now she was shaking in place. Anything fun or interesting going on? No. Oh, come on. There has to be something, anything. Nora, please. Ren just wants to go and take an early rest. I believe we should use this opportunity to re-energize and rejuvenate ourselves. The next semester is sure to be a hectic one, and we need to prepare ourselves for it while we can. Ugh, so boring. She ignored Ren's sage advice and turned to her and Sasuke. What about you? You're doing something exciting, right? Right? She shook her head. I'm just going to read before going to bed. I was thinking of a new training program to get my hands into working condition again. Blake immediately noticed the defeat in Nora's watering eyes as she fell to her knees. She hung her head and cried, "No! All the fun people left, and I got stuck with the boring brigade." Blake felt a modicum of indignity at being referred to as such, but she immediately felt worried when Nora looked back at them. "Wait, Sasuke, Naruto brought the game system back to your room, right?" "Oh no." The fool didn't seem to realize what she was asking when he answered, "Oh yeah, it isn't hooked up yet. Doesn't matter." Nora jumped back up to her feet and Blake felt a pit in her stomach. "Let's have an all-night game marathon where we play tournaments and anything else we can find on that console." "I'd rather not." No, thanks. Denied. They had her beat in numbers, but Blake quickly realized that she had them overwhelmed in energy and refusal to back down. She quickly found herself getting pulled into Noctic's room along with Ren and Sasuke as Nora started listing up everything they would do in this gaming marathon as she proposed. It didn't sound great, but they didn't have school tomorrow, so no harm. She supposed them. Plus, she could get her book back. Epilogue. Clusterfuck. That was the only way Roman Twitchwick felt like describing the situation at the docks. Useless, flea-ridden soldiers, some prick like a snazzy semblance, and zero training as his main support, and of course Little Red and her gang of merry nosy assholes ruining their operation. They only got away with a fraction of the dust they were expecting to take, and some of the White Fang had been captured in the process. Luckily, they were just some new recruits who didn't know anything, so even if they were interrogated or tortured, they wouldn't be able to give the authorities anything. But enough about the waste. He had to focus on himself. It was his ass on the line if he didn't supply enough dust. If she got rid of this, his goose was cooked, and by goose he meant his entire organs. He sighed and rubbed between his eyes as he realized that he needed to reorganize his efforts quickly before he got killed. Luckily, he had just the people coming in to assist him. Roman suddenly felt a small weight crush on his back and covered his eyes. His sight was blocked by the surrounding darkness, and whatever was hanging off of his back moved around and to better position itself around his neck. Tiny hands like claws around my eyes, jumping on my back like a monkey, sneaking up on me like a ghost. Granny Torchwick, is that you? And here I thought you were watching over me from the cozy little troll bridge in the sky. The hands pulled away from his eyes and slapped his shoulder as the weight settled off of his back. He turned around and gave a hearty chuckle at her expression. "Well, you were going to be my second guess." The young lady in question looked far too young to be a part of his criminal organization, standing at the diminutive height that betrayed her ruthless, dangerous nature. Her hair was a mix of brown and pink, with streaks of white mixed in the pink. Her eyes blinked and turned red up at him in anger as she put her hands up on her hips. She probably didn't appreciate the hands like claws and monkey on his back jokes at her expense. And with her umbrella in hand, he didn't feel like risking it. "Oh, it's a joke. Come on, laugh a little." She pouted and raised an eyebrow at his request, eyes going grey as if to ask why he even bothered. The orange-haired crook sighed and shrugged. "Okay, how about I treat you after this? Would that make it up to you?" And like a flip of a switch, she was perky and smiling up at him, her posture easing into a place with her eyes turning back to a normal in the mix of brown and pink. Sometimes he thought she just used her adorable pout and the implication that she would gut him as a way to get treats or gifts out of him, emotions, threats, intimidation, in a mix of lies in order to extort things out of him. God, he had taught her well. "So, Neo," he smirked as the short girl looked back up at him, "I hope that there were no problems on the way back." She shook her head and grinned in the devious way that said even if there was trouble, it didn't stay like that for long. And our guests. I would say she was the perfect little escort. The gravelly, hoarse voice reached his ears, even with the noise of the White Fang members moving supplies around the warehouse. Torchwick looked over to see a tall, pale man emerge from the darkness and make his way towards him. The man had a lean, almost sickly thin face and long, silky black hair, and he was dressed in a black outfit with a long black sash tied around his stomach, enough for a length of it to hang off of him. His eyes were yellow with slots down them as a thin smile grew on his face. Nice to see you again, Roman. After all this time, and I still feel like something is winding up my leg every time I see you. The crook started to laugh. And yet, I still feel better working with you than any other animal in this warehouse. I think that says more about you than it does them or I. Maybe. Roman shrugged before reaching into his coat to grab a cigar. You aren't insulted by the animal thing, are you? Feels like I'm walking on pins and needles with all these babies around. Can't even take a little race joke. If that's enough to get them riled up and stop their progress, then they deserve it. See, that right there, that's why I can always enjoy working with you, Orochimaru. You're a snake that at least knows how to act professional, and it's always a rewarding experience to work with you as well, Roman. Orochimaru nodded. That, and despite your loud mouth, you can at least keep some discretion. Well, I know better. Roman lit the cigar and took a long puff of it before leaning against the crate behind him. I heard all about politicians and businessmen that wanted to out you a lot after getting to use your services. Such a shame how their guilt took them over like that. I know. Such a shame, Orochimaru agreed in a level tone. Now, are you sure you want to go in on this venture with us? Roman blew out some smoke as Nail tilted her head down at the snake. Might take a while, and you probably won't get a chance to work with any other potential customer with us. That's fine. If this task is as interesting as you promise, then I'm sure I can cope. If not, then there'll be some choice words between us. He turned to give them a better look of the warehouse. Until then, other members of the operation jumped back or yelled in surprise when they finally noticed the figures in black that had snuck in and around the warehouse. Dozens of them slowly stepped into the peripheral as White Fang members started to murmur in suspicion. Elysium, is at your service? Roman chuckled and rose his eyes. I'll never understand why you named your business after the school of the undead. A spooky story, really. Orochimaru answered with a shrug. Seemed appropriate at the time. Well, I guess I should introduce you to who we were working with. Roman drawled before whistling loudly across the warehouse. Han, come meet our guests. Don't be shy. The massive figure trotted over and stopped behind Neil. The short girl craned her head back as far as possible to look up at the gargantuan horse fondness that lurched over her. She turned and smirked while he narrowed his glare down at her. He turned to look down at Roman and his guest. What is it, Torchwick? I want to introduce you to a new associate of ours, Orochimaru. This is Han, one of the White Fang's rosy-cheeked new volunteers. He's apparently a special little guy, someone you'd be quite interested in knowing. It's nice to meet you. Orochimaru greeted the stoic giant and looked him over. Quite a status quo fellow, aren't you? Han didn't seem to bother returning the greeting to his fellow fondness and looked back to Torchwick. The leaders are busy at the moment recruiting more noble guards, so until they return, I'll be the middleman between your plans and them. No arguments here. Torchwick already had more than enough trouble dealing with the problem children in his life right now. If he could get some time away from the moody redhead, then he was all for it. The big cheese probably won't have any complaints either. You shouldn't go presuming you understand her at all. Oh boy. The chuckle hits him. They all turned to face the two approaching figures. One a short girl with dark skin and light green hair. The other a tall boy with dark gray hair and a smirk on his face. Roman sighed. Oh great, you're back already. And here I thought I'd get a few more fleeting moments of peace before my walking migraines arrived. Believe me, the feeling is absolutely mutual. The girl responded, crossing her arms and scowling at the orange-haired crook. We got an early tip over to check and see how badly you screwed up. The boy noted with a tone of full mocking joy at seeing Roman suffer. Glad to see your scummy hideout is just as dirty as the last time we came over to clean up your mess. Well, of course you did. Roman cooed the two of them. Well, that's what the cleanup crew is for, remember? Clean up the shit while the big boys play. Was that big boys playing? The girl snarked. Seems like you started shaking in your overpriced boots and needed us too close for you. Aw, Robin covered his heart and swooned, turning to Orochimaru. They're just so cute with their sharp little tongues. Makes me want to take a knife, open their mouths, and just teach them a lesson. You can try if you want. The boy laughed and raised an eyebrow. You'll just be giving us a reason. As entertaining as this little back and forth is, let's show a little professionalism, shall we? Orochimaru didn't even bother to regard the tension between the three of them and waved off their legitimate antagonism to address the two young strangers. And may I ask who you two may be? You can ask as much as you want. The girl's face settled into a smug smile, but don't expect to get an answer. I suppose it should be expected. The snake laughed. I forgot how rebellious children can be in their youth. I doubt you would listen to anyone of authority at this age. Would you? I would. Her eyes narrowed. If they were strong enough to earn it. Just haven't quite met anyone to measure up. She's Emerald Sastre and I'm Mercury Black. Emerald turned to her associate and glared venomous daggers at him as he shrugged. This is going to go on forever if you keep being a pain in the butt. Bite the bullet. When you say Black, might you be referring to Marcus Black? Mercury smirked as Orochimaru chuckled. Well, I'm surprised to see we have such a blood-stained legacy in our midst. Sorry to hear about what happened to your father, lad. Meh, someone had to be. Mercury took quite a bit of enjoyment out of seeing their mixed reactions to his indifference. Roman groaned. I have no idea where in the gutter she pulled them out. And another thing, Roman, I've always appreciated your vision, but this hardly seems like your kind of game. So, if you aren't the mastermind, then who was it that brought us all together? I suppose that would be me. Sharp heels clicked against the warehouse floor loud enough to echo across the entire warehouse. All eyes turned to her as she slowly made her way over, her hips swaying with each step. Han's eyes narrowed and Roman looked away while Orochimaru looked at the woman with curiosity. Neo just looked calm as Mercury smiled and Emerald beamed at her arrival. The woman was beautiful, gorgeous to anyone with eyes. Her long black hair hung over one bare shoulder of her crimson and yellow dress that ended at her thighs. Her piercing eyes took all of them into account, but it seemed to feel wary of their presence, like she didn't even consider any of them potential threats. Cinder, Emerald's voice had more genuine joy in it than the last few minutes as the young woman passed by. I didn't think you'd actually come and be so rude to our new guests. Never. She stopped in front of Orochimaru. So, you must be the director of Elysium Roman told me so much about. Orochimaru, he bowed to the lovely lady and took her hand to lay a small kiss on the back of it. At your service. What a gentleman! Cinder took note of his gesture while Emerald narrowed her eyes suspiciously at the pale man. Cinder fall, and I'm the one that requested Roman to ask you to join us. An honor. He stood back up tall, towering over their elegant leader before she asked him. And Roman made sure to inform you of what this mission may entail. Of course, he'd warned me of dangers and horrors we'll commit, but the rewards and promises just seemed too inviting to pass up. Wonderful. Her voice never raised from a sultry warm such a hush before looking over at Torchwick, the cocky crook going stiff under her gaze. Once Roman has procured enough dust, we can start heading out and begin the next phase. Roman sighed. The fact you expect any more is disconcerting enough. And what exactly are these faces we're planning? The tension all turned to the horse faunas as the giant man shrugged his shoulders. If you don't mind me asking, all in due time, I assure you. Cinder smiled and looked between the key players surrounding her. But rest assured, if you help fulfill our plan, everything you hope for will come true. Survival, enjoyment, identity, purpose, recognition, evolution, all of it promised, as long as they could bring this world and its structures tumbling down. Cinder turned on her heel and made her way back out of the way she came. Mercury and Emerald followed behind her like the loyal retainers they had become. Everything in place. Soon enough. End of chapter 45.